Hello again. I believe I figured out what happened, why the first video cut off when it did. It seems that the converter that I was using to change the format of the recording from AVI into another format, because I'm not paying for it, that I'm just giving it a trial run. They are cutting it off at the 60% completed mark. So my evil scheme now is to put the meat of the video at the beginning and then just let it run it on for a few minutes afterwards. That way, hopefully, if we time it correctly, what will be cut off will just be extraneous material. Okay, so where were we? Well, we were talking about the film The Titfield Thunderbolt and why I thought it was, why it has been misunderstood as a conservative or reactionary film. I think I had gotten as far as saying what the town was up to and the national events that were in the background. Now, I think the charge of conservatism or reactionaryism comes from the fact that they were trying to preserve something old-fashioned in the face of a national project of modernization. Now, that can, of course, be the case in a lot of situations, but I do not hasten to say that was the case in this situation. This was a town who, without this railway, would lose its sense of identity or purpose. It would lose its connection to the rest of the country. It would just become another car and bus and lorry-ridden industrial town. They didn't want that. They didn't want to lose the kind of environment that they found that they were thriving in, and that's the key thing. That this was an effort to preserve, to maintain a kind of way of life in which these people found themselves to be flourishing in, and that doesn't seem to be the definition of conservatism. No, that seems to be the definition of liberalism. That is, say, where you find the optimum environment for a person's liberties to flourish by allowing the individual to flourish, and you need a particular kind of environment to do that. Also, it bears mentioning just how kind of anti-classist this film was. The people who ran this railway were from the higher echelons of society as well as from the lower ones. The engineer was a vicar, and the fellow who bought the railway, played marvelously by Stanley Holloway. This rich fellow who bought the railway just so that he could set his own timetable and therefore his own time for when the dining car would open, which means he could get drunk even early in the morning. Oh, I love that character. Anyway, but there was also a plate layer named Dan, who was a drunken no-account prior to this takeover by the town of this railway. He became an integral part of them running this railway, and there was a very moving moment when the vicar emphatically tells him that he's needed. And it was a very moving moment for me because little boys like myself don't like feeling excluded. They don't like to be made to feel because of their age or size or whatever that they're not as valued as other people. And certainly Dan, Hugh Griffith's character, this plate layer, felt that, and he found his life changing all to the better because of this of their takeover of this railway. So it was, I think, a rather progressive film in the sense of finding ways to accommodate these small, seemingly trivial corporations or communities or whatever to allow them to thrive, so that other people do not become marginalized, so that the common folk will not become useless in the sake of national interest, which is I usually find to be the result of rampant conservatism and laissez-faire capitalism. So there you go. Anyway, so this sense of a community coming together for the sake of something beautiful like this branch railway, and also of people finding their lives flourishing when they've committed to something as a joint project to the mutual benefit. And also just people who, just a situation where someone would do it for something so seemingly as trivial as a love of railways and steam. That made a strong impression on me as a child. I didn't understand the ideas as ideas, but I did feel them, and I felt them very strongly. And it was the stage upon which this was set was in England, and I had the sense of this happening in England before anywhere else. It certainly happened many other places, as well as in America, and has always been. But the first place I had the sense of this happening was in England, and that began my relationship with this country, which developed after from that. So that's my introduction to say why I have this long relationship with England. It all started when I was a very small boy when I saw this film, The Titfield Thunderbolt. Okay, so that will be the intro. A few more videos to follow. I'll try to do this every weekend. I apologize for the wait for this one. It took me a while to figure out, say, what the problem actually was. And I would also like to thank the encouragement and comments from my friends, Vintage Typewriter and That Lovely English Bob. Both are from England, and I believe are true ornaments of the realm. Okay, so if my scheme works, I will now run out the clock, and hopefully the 60% that will be preserved will be, hopefully it will include all the points hitherto. Okay, so I'm just going to babble on now. Let's see here, I could recite a poem. Let's see, here's a poem about whaling that I learned as a child. There was a Bedford whaler who... Well, let me try to recollect a little bit better. There was a Bedford whaler set out to hunt for oil, with the try-works and the midships where chunks of whale could boil, and the forecastle wet and frowsy, where whalers' crews could gam, and the captain came from Bedford, and did not give a cent. So over the bar from Bedford to hunt for whales she went, but never a whale did she sight in 28 moons. She never lowered her boats in chase, or readied her harpoons. So home she went to Bedford, where her owners came to ask, how many tons of whalebone, Cap, and how much oil in cask? The captain rolled his tobacco within his weather cheek, and said, at least the Bible says